Growing up in the city of Malmö in southern Sweden was an adventure. My friends and I, all about 14 or 15, attended the same international school, which used English as our primary language. We were a close group of 5, making the most of the safe environment of Malmö that our parents trusted us to explore, especially areas around our school. During the summer, we often visited Folkets Park, a favorite local destination, especially known for its iconic Ferris wheel. Our parents and siblings usually came along, which curtailed our freedom a little, but I understand their caution now. It was late August on one of these family outings to Folkets when my friend Isabella got talking to a local guy, Eric. He claimed to be a year older than her. Being fluent in Swedish, Isabella found it easy to chat with Eric. They hit it off and decided to exchange phone numbers. Eric gave me the creeps from the start. He seemed older than he claimed, and his lingering gaze made me uncomfortable. On our way back to meet our parents, I suggested to Isabella that she should delete Eric's number, but she laughed off my suggestion. Among our group, I was the smallest, and my friends often felt protective of me. I admit I was a bit naive back then, and perhaps my judgment wasn't always sound, but my gut feeling about Eric was hard to ignore. Isabella dismissed my concerns as baseless fear of strangers. Her fascination with Eric, however, only increased my discomfort. As the weeks went by, Eric's presence in Isabella's life became more pronounced. He had an uncanny knack for showing up when she was with us, stealing her away with excuses of needing her help or wanting to spend time with her alone. He was subtly pulling her away from us, and it worked. Moreover, we noticed that Isabella's behavior started changing. She began missing our regular hangouts, often citing Eric's plans. It was as if she was slowly drifting away from us, her circle of lifelong friends, and was being drawn into Eric's world. Eric also seemed to have a profound influence on her actions and decisions. He'd fill her head with sweet promises and hollow dreams, causing her to neglect not only her friends but also her studies and family responsibilities. He told her things like, "Your parents are just trying to control you," or "Your friends are jealous of our relationship," manipulating her into isolating herself. But what was more disturbing was the way Isabella seemed to accept all of this willingly. It was as if Eric had cast a spell on her, making her blind to his manipulative tactics. Despite our repeated attempts to point out Eric's controlling behavior, Isabella shrugged it off, convinced that he genuinely cared for her. Fortunately, I had Sophia, a friend who I was particularly close to. When I shared my apprehensions with her on the Ferris wheel, she agreed with me and helped me voice my concerns to Isabella and our other friends, Astrid and Elsa. Isabella and Astrid didn't seem worried. Elsa was on the fence, likely thinking our worries were out of an overactive imagination from hearing tales of girls being lured away. Our pleas fell on deaf ears. Sophia, however, suggested that Elsa and I discreetly keep an eye on Isabella. We also agreed not to involve parents unless things escalated, a decision we almost regretted when Isabella started secretly meeting Eric, hiding it from her parents. Our worries only grew when Isabella began to miss practice to meet Eric. Stories of their budding romance filled us with dread. One afternoon in mid-October, Isabella left us at a shopping centre to meet Eric. That day, Astrid was ill, leaving Sophia, Elsa and I to decide to tail Isabella. We followed her to an out-of-the-way coffee shop, and as we watched from a distance, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed a strange man staring at us intently from across the street. I nudged Elsa and pointed him out, but when she turned to look, there was nothing there. His sudden disappearance, coupled with Eric's unsettling gaze on Isabella, sent alarm bells ringing in my head. We met at my house later and planned to convince Isabella about Eric's unsettling nature. But before we could act, Isabella called us. She was head over heels for Eric, dismissing our warnings as mere jealousy. We suggested that she tell her parents about Eric if she was serious about him, but she refused. We ended up apologizing and discussing weekend homework instead. After that, we decided it was time to involve our parents, despite the fear of damaging our friendships with Isabella and Astrid. Hoping to find Isabella's parents at home, we rushed to her house. After sharing our concerns, we asked her mother not to disclose our involvement. Her promise to handle the matter delicately left us feeling somewhat relieved. However, the very next day at school, we found ourselves cornered by an angry Isabella and Astrid. They had discovered our intervention and were furious, wanting nothing more to do with us. Their words stung, but Sophia and Elsa were my rocks. reassuring me that Isabella and Astrid would understand why we did what we did. I clung on to that hope, believing we had acted for the right reasons, even if it meant our friendship would never be the same. Weeks later, Elsa and I were at my house when the doorbell rang. To my surprise, it was Isabella, Astrid, and Sophia. Their eyes were puffy from crying. I immediately let them in and we gathered around my kitchen table where Sophia proceeded to reveal what had transpired. After Isabella's parents had stepped in, she began meeting Eric secretly, leaving notes in her window for him. Sophia then explained that during her investigation into Eric's behavior, she discovered that it mirrored tactics often used in cases of human trafficking in countries like Serbia or Russia. She never thought this could be common in Sweden, but disturbing statistics she came across suggested otherwise. By their third meeting, Isabella packed a bag, pretending she was going to a sleepover at Astrid's. Instead, she rode her bike to the train station to meet Eric. She was waiting for him in a cafe near the train platforms when her father called Astrid's house. He wanted to drop off a mouthguard Isabella used for teeth grinding, only to discover from Astrid's mother that there was no sleepover and Isabella wasn't expected there. We were all so close that our parents often trusted confirmation from any of us instead of verifying with each other. Luckily, Isabella's dad drove straight to the train station. He spotted her bike outside and hurried in, only to see Eric and two older men carrying a seemingly unconscious Isabella towards a large grey van. He charged at them, causing a scene which led to them dropping Isabella and escaping. Isabella's father found her drugged and took her straight to the hospital. The police were involved but were never able to find Eric. They did inform Isabella's parents about similar incidents where young girls were groomed for abduction and transported to countries like Serbia or Romania to be forced into the sex trade. As Sophia told us all this, Elsa and I were shell-shocked. Once Sophia finished, Isabella broke down crying, apologizing for not listening to our warnings. We all hugged and spent several hours reconnecting and processing what had happened. A year or two after our encounter, we heard a similar story unfolding in another part of Malmö. The narrative was eerily familiar. A group of young girls, much like us, entangled in a situation that seemed like a mirror of our past. It was as if the past was reaching out, reminding us of the what-ifs that we had narrowly escaped. Drawn into their plight, we felt an irresistible pull to connect with these girls. It wasn't a desire to lecture or educate, it was a need to empathize, to let them know they weren't alone. We had walked the path they were on, felt the fear they were feeling, and survived. We decided to reach out to them. We began by sharing our own experiences, not to scare them but to communicate that we understood. Through our conversations, we hoped to provide comfort and solidarity. We wanted to give them a safe space to voice their fears, their guilt and their anger without judgment or expectation. As we retold our tale, the words echoed with a surreal quality. The fear, the uncertainty, the despair we once felt returned to us, but with it came an overwhelming sense of strength and resilience. We were no longer the victims but survivors, strong women who had faced the darkness and emerged into the light. The second incident was a grim reminder of the harsh reality many young girls unknowingly face. It opened old wounds and brought back memories of our transition from naive teenagers to aware individuals. Yet it reinforced our resolve to stand by the side of those who found themselves in similar situations, to offer support and understanding. Looking back, we wouldn't wish our experiences on anyone, but we also couldn't ignore the indelible impact it had on our lives. The episode spurred a growth within us, teaching us to face life's uncertainties with courage. It reminded us that every unexpected twist in our journey contributes to our growth and change. Thank you for listening to our story, for being a part of our journey, even if only for a moment. Growing up, one of my most vivid memories is playing marbles with my friends during break time. We were in the 5th grade at our small village school, and we were obsessed with this game. The area around our school was filled with trees and bordered by a beautiful lake, providing a serene backdrop to our innocent fun. Most of the girls in our class didn't play marbles, preferring other games instead. But surprisingly, I got really good at it. We used to play on the bumpy ground near our school, where we had made tiny holes for our bright and colourful marbles. My younger sister Emma, who was in the 3rd grade, often came over to watch us play, She was always interested in the shiny marbles and seemed to enjoy the fun and friendly spirit of our game. However, our idyllic recess activities took an unsettling turn when a new teacher joined our school. Miss Katerina, as she introduced herself, had an air of peculiarity about her from the start. She would address us in a manner that seemed overly familiar, as if we were her own children. It made us feel uncomfortable, but at such a young age we couldn't quite articulate why. Nonetheless, we tried to adapt to her unusual ways as the year progressed, partly because we were children who trusted the adults around us. Emma, being an innocent and curious child, often spoke about her interactions with Miss Katerina during recess. She would tell me how the teacher took a particular interest in her, engaging her in conversations and paying her special attention. Emma found it intriguing at first, as she felt a sense of importance being singled out by our teacher. Miss Katerina would often extend invitations for Emma and another classmate to stay back after lessons, claiming it was to help with various classroom tasks, or simply to spend more time together. Emma, being the polite and well-mannered child she was, would sometimes agree, not fully grasping the underlying intentions behind Miss Katerina's actions. One fateful day, Emma ended up staying longer at school than usual. It was an unusual occurrence since we typically finished our classes around 3 or 4 p.m. In those days, when mobile phones were a rarity among children, it wasn't easy to reach someone in such situations. Concerned, my parents decided to visit the school to find out why Emma hadn't returned home. To their surprise, they discovered that Emma had been given detention by Miss Katerina for alleged misbehavior during class. However, when my parents questioned Emma about the incident, she vehemently denied any wrongdoing. Emma explained that she had been unjustly detained by Miss Katerina, who had kept her back without any valid reason. My mother's maternal instincts kicked into high gear upon hearing Emma's account. Emma was a diligent and well-behaved student, making my mother suspicious of Miss Katerina's motives. She confronted the teacher, demanding an explanation for the unjust detention. Miss Katerina, quick to change her demeanor, switched back to her pleasant and caring facade, explaining that Emma had indeed misbehaved in class and the detention was warranted. With no concrete evidence to support Emma's claims, my parents found themselves caught in a distressing situation. They decided to make an official complaint against Miss Katerina, hoping to shed light on her questionable behavior. Unfortunately, their efforts proved futile. Other teachers, whom my parents approached as potential witnesses, vouched for Miss Katerina's character, claiming that she would never engage in such inappropriate conduct. They dismissed Emma's account as mere fantasy, attributing it to an overactive imagination. It was disheartening for my parents, feeling helpless in the face of the system's unwillingness to acknowledge the potential danger Miss Katerina posed. Nonetheless, my parents took swift action to protect Emma. They insisted on her being transferred to a different class, ensuring she would no longer be under Miss Katerina's influence. The change brought some relief, but the unsettling memories and unanswered questions lingered. Shortly after Emma's transfer, we learned that Miss Katerina had committed the unthinkable. News reached us that she had taken advantage of her position of authority and engaged in inappropriate conduct with one of her students. The shock and horror that washed over us were indescribable. It was a chilling realization that our suspicions about Miss Katerina's intentions were not unfounded. The incident confirmed that Emma's encounter was not an isolated incident, but rather part of a pattern of predatory behavior. However, the story did not end there. The aftermath of Miss Katerina's actions remained shrouded in mystery. It was unclear what consequences she faced or how she was held accountable for her misconduct. We never saw her again, and the silence surrounding her fate left us with lingering unease. In the years that followed, our family found ways to heal from the traumatic experience. Emma, resilient as ever, thrived in her new class and remained focused on her studies. We celebrated her strength and resilience, grateful that she had emerged from the ordeal with her spirit intact. Rumors about Miss Katerina would occasionally float back to us. Some suggested she had faced legal consequences and was no longer able to teach. Others whispered that she had moved to another school in a different part of the city. The conflicting reports, however, offered no clear answer and only added to the cloud of mystery surrounding her fate. In the absence of definitive proof, we were left with our own thoughts and speculations. My parents maintained their belief in Emma's account, a painful reminder of the trust betrayed by a person in a position of power. I often found myself wondering about the others, the children who might have silently suffered, their voices unheard in the hum of everyday life. Despite the uncertainty, we chose to move forward, carrying the lessons we had learned. The marbles we once played with held a different meaning now, a symbol of lost innocence but also of the resilience we discovered in the face of adversity. Even now, the memory of Miss Katerina is like a ghost story, a chilling reminder of the reality some people face. Driven by a desire for a new beginning, I said goodbye to my comfortable life in Gothenburg. My goal was clear, to study in another city, and I always wanted to see Stockholm. At that time, I had no idea how this decision was going to completely change my view of people. In my second year at university, I met a guy named Simon. The campus was always full of people, but he stood out. He was always telling us about his supposed training at the fancy Swedish police academy. Even back then, I wondered if he was just making his stories sound better to impress us. Simon often talked about his job as a nighttime guard. It wasn't for a fancy place like he first said, though. He was actually looking after the big transport system that linked all the city's train stations. His job was to keep things in order and make sure that people traveling late at night were safe. He'd tell us about the rush of people filling the stations at busy times, quiet chats between passengers on empty platforms, and sometimes meeting people who seemed lost or upset during their late-night travels. Simon saw himself as a kind of nighttime hero, quietly looking out for everyone moving around the city after dark. When he talked about his job, his eyes would light up with pride and fascination. He could make you see the moody lighting in the stations, hear the echo of footsteps down the tunnels, and feel the rumble of a train coming in the distance. It was like he was opening a door into a world full of stories just waiting to be told. But as time went on, I started to wonder. His stories were always so detailed, and they fit together so well that it made me suspicious. Were they just made up to sound good, or were they part of a darker truth he was keeping to himself? The mystery that had first made him interesting now gave me a strange feeling, like I needed to find out what was really going on. Despite the numerous red flags that popped up early in our relationship, I continuously turned a blind eye, captivated by Simon's magnetic pull. One of the most alarming incidents was the revelation that he had fathered a child with an 18-year-old girl just the year before we met. It was a clear indication of his impulsiveness and disregard for responsibility. But it was Simon's strange actions when other men tried to chat with me that really made me uncomfortable. He didn't just cause trouble in bars, he had a knack for being aggressive and threatening. I saw him use hidden threats, tricky manipulation, and even physical strength to discourage anyone who dared to strike up a conversation with me. It was as if he thought of me as his own, something he needed to protect fiercely. These encounters created a stifling atmosphere, the air heavy with the tension of unspoken threats and the constant worry about what could happen next. Witnessing his sudden outbursts of anger and how far he would go to defend what he believed was his territory sent shivers down my spine. It was a harsh reality check. Beneath his charming and friendly exterior, there was a deeply possessive and potentially dangerous side. Despite the unease that crept into my thoughts, I convinced myself that these incidents were isolated, that Simon's professed love for me would overshadow his volatile tendencies. Blinded by infatuation, I clung to the distorted image of our relationship, choosing to ignore the glaring warning signs. Little did I know that my unwavering belief in the goodness of his intentions was nothing more than an illusion. I had fallen victim to my own misplaced trust, naively assuming that love alone could tame the darkness lurking within him. It was a sobering realization, one that would shape the path I was about to embark on. Before we celebrated midsummer, Simon surprised me with a playful border collie puppy. I chose to name her Luna. With her distinct black and white fur and playful behavior, Luna brought a small ray of happiness into our troubled relationship. Having Luna around acted like a short pause button, offering little moments of peace amidst the growing tension between Simon and me. Her constant loyalty and endless bursts of energy served as a happy reminder of the simple joys in life. However, even with Luna's innocent playfulness, I couldn't overlook the bigger issues that were causing a rift in our relationship. While Luna provided a momentary sense of comfort, I knew deep down that the problems we were facing couldn't be solved by a furry friend alone. During the midsummer holidays, I went back to my family in Gothenburg. Together, we decided that it would be best for me to switch to a university in my home city and finish my studies in a familiar place. I was beginning to feel let down by life in Stockholm. I had started to see the tough truths that were hidden beneath its attractive outer layer. The city's lively streets and energetic vibe were masking a darker side, full of hidden struggles, dreams that had been broken and hardships that people didn't talk about. I began to feel let down by the people I was spending time with in Stockholm. I saw some girls trying to trap men into marriage through unexpected pregnancies, instead of focusing on their studies. Their plans to manipulate their way into a secure future, instead of growing as individuals and becoming independent, only made me feel more out of place. It was clear their goals weren't the same as mine, and their values were very different from my own. This big difference made me even more sure about my decision to go back to Gothenburg, where I could be around people who valued education and personal growth like I did. When I told Simon about my decision, he exploded in anger. He constantly called and texted me, bombarding me with his messages. And then out of nowhere, he suddenly stopped and went silent for several days. The abrupt silence was both a relief and a cause for concern. On one hand, I felt a temporary sense of peace without his constant presence. But on the other hand, I couldn't help but wonder about the reason behind his sudden change. During those quiet days, I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. I didn't know what to expect next. It was like the calm before a storm, leaving me uncertain and on edge. Unfortunately, the silence didn't last long. Simon reappeared, unleashing a new wave of torment. It became clear that his silence was a calculated move, a strategy to catch me off guard and exert further control. In all this mess, Luna, the sweet puppy Simon gave me, became an innocent victim. Simon claimed that she had fallen sick and tragically passed away. The news devastated me. However, his aunt, in a moment of bravery, shared the horrifying truth. She revealed that Simon had heartlessly run over Luna with his truck. Finding out the truth shattered any love I still had for Simon. It was a deep betrayal that showed how cruel and heartless he could be. The days leading up to my finals passed by in a blur of stress and anticipation. With each exam completed, my departure from Stockholm was getting nearer. As I prepared to leave, my mother made the journey from Gothenburg to help me pack my belongings and bid farewell to this chapter of my life. On the evening before I was to leave, Simon made a last-ditch effort to save our broken relationship. He gifted me a flashy diamond ring that seemed to come from a budget jewelry store like and Penn. The ring's cheap look mirrored the hollowness of his move, a weak attempt at trying to get me to stay, but I stayed strong with my choice. I made it clear that I was leaving Stockholm no matter what false promises or small efforts were made. He responded by locking me inside his Volvo truck and kidnapping me, steering us towards his hidden caravan in a secluded park around 90 minutes away from my hotel. The park was eerily quiet. The only sounds were the rustling of spruce trees and the occasional call of a distant bird. As we arrived, he nonchalantly pointed towards a small, old house hidden in the forest. "That's my uncle's place," Simon told me, as if the situation were normal, as if he were just any other person showing me around. His words hung heavy in the cold night air. The old house and our caravan, standing alone under the dim moonlight, were the only signs of human life in this remote and wild part of the forest. That night was really scary. Every little noise made me jump. His laughter bounced off the walls of the caravan, making me shiver. I tried not to cry, but it was hard. I wanted to forget everything that happened, but the memory stuck to me like a shadow. When morning came, he acted like everything was normal. He made coffee and ate breakfast as if nothing was wrong. It was strange to watch him act so casual when I was so scared. Before he left for work, he locked the door. He looked at me and said, "You're not going anywhere." It wasn't a question, but a promise. And then, just like that, he left. I was alone and scared, trapped inside the caravan with my thoughts. All I could think about was how to get out of there. As soon as he disappeared from view, I knew I had to act. My heart pounded in my chest as I picked up a heavy frying pan from the kitchen. With one swift, desperate swing, I shattered the window. Carefully, I crawled through, avoiding the shards of glass. His uncle's house was a dim light in the distance. With my heart pounding and fear swirling in my mind, I ran towards it. Inside, I found an old landline phone. With shaking hands, I dialed my father's number. His voice, worried and confused, filled my ears as I hastily explained the horror of my situation. His stunned silence told me he had no idea what I had been through. Simon's uncle, shocked by my story, promptly called his sister, Simon's aunt. She arrived in a matter of minutes, a worried look on her face. Once I explained what happened, she took control of the situation. She drove me back to the caravan to retrieve my purse. Throughout the drive, she defended Simon, insisting that he was a good kid who just made a very bad mistake. I kept silent, focusing on the familiar sight of my hotel as it got closer. The nightmare was finally coming to an end. When I finally walked through the door of my home, I felt a wave of relief, but it took a while for my parents to fully grasp the terrifying experience I had endured. I sat them down and laid out everything that had happened. Shock and disbelief marked their faces as they tried to comprehend my words. Simon didn't seem to understand that it was over, though. He started to spam our house with phone calls. His voice, once casual and creepy, had now turned pleading and scared. It reached a point where we had to intervene. We approached the police and filed a restraining order against him. It wasn't a decision we took lightly, but it was crucial for our safety. Slowly, life began to feel a bit more normal. I met someone new, someone who brought a sense of safety and love back into my life. We planned a trip to Liseberg, a well-known amusement park, and I posted our plans on Facebook. But in the end, we chose a different plan. We decided to go to a family friend's cabin in Kiruna, way up north. The peaceful quiet of the cabin felt right after all the recent chaos. As we settled into the thick forests of Kiruna, I knew that at least I wasn't alone. Not knowing we changed plans, Simon suddenly showed up at Liseberg, desperately asking around for me. Security quickly stepped in, seeing the possible danger, and fast took him off the property. It was a sigh of relief knowing that our decision to change our destination had saved me from a possibly dangerous encounter. The last piece of information I received about Simon was deeply unsettling. It revolved around a New Year's Eve party where he had become involved with a 17-year-old girl. Things got worse fast, and everyone was surprised Simon not only got her pregnant but also married her. It was a shocking discovery, showing the scary road he was able to take. When I heard this upsetting news, I couldn't stop thinking about the near miss I had and the lucky change in plans that kept me safe. Even now, just imagining what could have happened if I didn't escape still scares me. The memory of barely getting away doesn't leave me. It's stuck deep inside, making my thoughts feel heavy. When I reflect on everything, my mind often wanders to the young girl, only 17 years old, who unknowingly got caught up in Simon's manipulative and dangerous games. I can't help but wonder what happened to her, how her life unfolded after that life-changing New Year's Eve. The uncertainty surrounding her and the lingering questions about her choices and actions remind me of how our lives can intertwine in unexpected ways, even when we are no longer directly connected.